Hello, welcome again to Sport Unlocked, going through all the week's sports news with me, Rob Harris from Sky News, Martyn Ziegler from The Times, and Tariq Panja from the New York Times. As ever, if you hit subscribe, we land in your feeds automatically. So perhaps you might have got some inspiration from our chat right at the start of the year when we were wondering which of the sports could go to Saudi Arabia. I think we said darts, close maybe, snooker.
The golden ball is the new Saudi Arabia snooker innovation. We've heard about the black and the pink and the blue. Well, we're now the golden ball, where you get an extra 20 points, which is I think, why not the platinum? Make it an extra 50.
Everyone's dreamed of scoring that 167 break. You mentioned darts, Rob. It's the same people behind the darts, isn't it? It's the Hearns, father and son, that have done this deal with Saudi Arabia for 3-day tournament in March with this golden ball as the kind of signature element to this. It made me think. Do you think the 2034 World Cup, just to make it more exciting, there'll be 2 golden balls on the same pitch in the last 10 minutes of the game to make it more exciting?
Do you mean Beckham will sign up for Saudi?
Yeah, well, I was also thinking, Saudi's also had a lot of these fight sports, big boxing bouts. So in the last round, if there's not been a knockout, each boxer gets a glove made of real gold in order to knock the other guy out. All sorts of things. And the mastermind behind all this seems to be a guy called Turki Al-Sheikh, the head of their entertainment arm. And famously, the first, if you want to call it sport, he brought to Saudi was WWE. It seems sport as entertainment is his thing. We're going to see quite a lot of this, aren't we?
We are. It's the World Snooker Tour's first major event going to Saudi Arabia. It's part of this Riyadh season, which has been going for a long time. And the event's going to be right at the start of March. It's going to have the greats of snooker, including Ronnie O'Sullivan and Trump. And this 23rd Riyadh season ball, as it's known, will only be able to be potted after completing a maximum break. But it really does show their determination to bring every major event there. And great business for the Hearns, Barry and Eddie. They built up all these sports over the years, perhaps sports that were unloved, didn't get the attention. They certainly spotted the financial opportunity with them.
Are you still blocked by Turki Al-Sheikh, Tariq, on
social media? Yeah, unfortunately. So love to speak with him. Maybe this is a good forum for us to have a chat. But there's been another signing as well. I think Rafael Nadal has signed up to be a sponsor of Saudi Arabia as well in recent times, similar to Lionel Messi with Saudi tourism. Do you think what this has shown, at least for me, is like these sports are quite old and these rules of sports are old, etc. And there seems to be a price for anything to happen, and Saudi Arabia seem to have the money. We seem to, like snooker essentially for this tournament. I don't know how old snooker is, Ziggs, older than us, has 147 as the top score. Now we got 167 thanks to the munificence of Saudi Arabia.
And the prize pool only seems to be $1 million. So you don't need to spend a lot to really get a foothold. And they have got a lot of coverage. I mean, some people will be, or quite a lot of people might be mocking or deriding this golden ball, but it gets them attention. It creates a talking point when we're not talking about other Saudi issues then perhaps as well. Is it a great distraction while still all eyes then on Saudi, what they're doing with sport?
No, that's a good point actually, Rob. Just to go back to how old snooker is, well, it was, I think, a Victorian innovation. And according to my research, it was first played by British Army officers stationed in India. So
there you go.
Yeah, well, that's how far we're going back.
Quite a long time. We'll have to change some of the lyrics to Snooker Loopy as well. That song that has sort of charted snooker for so long. Because I think 147 is the number. We're going to have to get 167 in the remix of the Snooker Loopy song, guys.
But someone who won't be sticking around in Saudi to go to Riyadh season, Jordan Henderson is left. He's gone.
Yeah, well, I think we talked about this on the last podcast that we did, that he sort of had effectively said that he wanted out, and now it's been confirmed. An interesting side note to this is that whether he's actually going to get any money from the time he's been there, because he deferred the his salary for tax reasons. I think he wanted the idea where he was going to be paid in the next financial year, so he wouldn't incur UK income tax. Now he's in a situation where he's asked to be released, and there's question marks over whether actually he's going to get any money at all. I mean, I think he might get some, but perhaps not as much as he thought.
Yeah, and Saudi Arabia notorious in the past for not paying players their wages and being hauled in front of FIFA Saudi Arabian clubs. So that would be interesting. But I
interestingly, they did announce though concurrently another deal, a new deal for Steven Gerrard at Henderson's old club, Al Ettifaq. So in the same news cycle, you've got how Steven Gerrard staying in a statement saying how determined he is to sort of stay in Saudi. And he said the easy decision would have been to stay in Liverpool to wait for jobs. I've learned about adapting to a new culture. That's made me a better person and a better coach.
And a richer man, no doubt. But you're right. It's interesting that they announced those two things at the same time. And in terms of announcements as well, and we've talked about Henderson for so long, I'm kind of bored of him a little bit. But just looking at his justification in that interview with The Athletic in September or whenever it was, for moving to Saudi, he said he was doing it in the best interests for himself and his family. And looking at the quotes from Ajax a few months later, again, it's like in my best interest of my family. It's just funny, like the PR twaddle that comes out when these things happen. No doubt he's realised made a massive blunder, and it's time to move on.
Yeah, particularly if he's trying to play at the Euros this summer in Germany.
Well, I think a lot of people would probably like us to sit here and criticise the Saudi League and everything that went along with that, but that certainly wasn't the case, and that's something that I'm not going to do. I've got full respect for the league, for Ettifaq, the club, for the people over there who really made us feel welcome. But unfortunately, these things in life sometimes just don't work out, in football, in life in general. And I made a decision as soon as I knew that this opportunity was there. I had to make a decision, and the decision was this was the best move for me and my family at this time. If anybody was offended or feel as though I've upset them, then that's on me. That was my decision, and I apologise for that. That was never my intention. But I just want to look forward now and concentrate on being the best player I can be for Ajax.
Of course, all roads seem to lead to Saudi with FIFA, but this week FIFA were in London. It was all about the FIFA Best Awards, which meant we could encounter so many of our listeners, actually. We were around the FIFA hotel, the three of us, this week in central London, and it's always quite welcoming, isn't it, when, contrary to the perception of many people, some of those that we do talk about, they are happy to engage, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. It was, very sort of enjoyable afternoon, wasn't it, in one of Mayfair's top hotels, just speaking to various people from FIFA and other parts of football. We were... Nobody was anything other than welcoming and friendly.
Yeah, and it's interesting when we get to have those chats as well face to face. You realise actually is often a perception reality thing. Some people perceive something we're commenting on is more negative than it might be. Even someone commenting on last week's pod thinking we were being critical of FIFA, where particularly around communications, we were talking about how actually FIFA can help around the world and help the reach of the global game. And someone actually tweeted us separately, someone in communications, Joe Downs, said, good Sport and Lot podcast chat about how FIFA's use of local comms agencies is assisting under-resourced FAs and helping boost growth and reach. I think in part that was actually a suggestion from us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were sort of both advising what FIFA and what might be a good strategy, as well as talking about what was happening at the moment.
So what about those FIFA Best Awards held in Hammersmith? They certainly got a lot of analysis and post-match scrutiny, didn't they, about who picked up the awards. Let's start with the men's award, Lionel Messi. And this was not for the period covering his World Cup win with Argentina. This was purely for 2023. The voting done by journalists, captains and managers of the national teams. But does the issue start with the original shortlist being formed at FIFA?
Potentially. I mean, there is, I think, the sort of, that when you're doing this sort of box ticking exercise and you're a sort of national team captain, you haven't got much time. I think in the past there's been a tendency to take Messi or Ronaldo as a sort of default position. So I think there's certainly a lot of surprise, considering Messi had won it correctly a year ago because of what he'd done at the at the 2022 World Cup. But I mean, I don't think 2023 has been his greatest ever year. He was at PSG. He got what did he do? He got sent. He got disciplined by PSG for going on an unauthorized trip to Saudi Arabia, and then he went to Inter Miami, who I think finished second from bottom of the table.
Although he did win a cup.
Yes, he did win a cup. Yeah, not a stellar year for Messi. And just to go back the year before, I mean, not just the World Cup, he won his first title with Argentina as well, which was the Copa America as well. So all of the things that people said he needed to do to be the all-time great, he did. But just the year after, it feels like he's been not quite on holiday, but clearly not having to play at the standards he did before. It just makes you question the awards and whether they're a personality type of thing and someone who's famous rather than for sporting merit. The second and third places were who?
Haaland. Third was Mbappe.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah.
Haaland clearly should have won that. We don't get into the actual football analysis often, but a first season in the Premier League, helping Manchester City win the treble, being on another level. But ultimately, look at the voting. It was the fan vote that pushed it in Messi's direction, not the captains, managers, and journalists.
There's a sort of big body of fans who will vote for their hero, whatever he does. So, I mean, you actually seen it before in various. I think when they used to have people voting in for goal of the month on the BBC Match of the Day, when it was all done by a public vote, and then you'd have a sort of fan base just like voting somebody in and completely skewing the vote. So I never think that's necessarily a good thing, but usually I'm all in favour of democracy, but perhaps not then.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned the fans there, and that one skewed. But then I was looking at the other awards. I was looking at the Women's Team of the Year, for example, and there were some strange choices in that. And that was the FIFA Pro Women's Team of the Year, and that's picked by the players. And it struck me one of the names on there, Alex Morgan, who's been a great for the US national team over the years, but hasn't been particularly good over the last year, or pretty much a non-entity at the Women's World Cup in 2023, where the US were dumped out. Was just centre forward in there, and their mission of a player like Linda Caicedo of Colombia lit the tournament up. It's just funny how these things work out, and I just wonder how much footballers actually watch. They're playing and they're working and they're training and they're having these games. Maybe they're not watching that much football as well. And you look at some of the other awards, talking to some players as well. Some of them, famously, Ben White at Arsenal, he doesn't like watching football. He doesn't really like football. He's just very good at it. So it's funny how these choices come about.
A sense they're skewed towards those big leagues that perhaps get more global TV coverage as well. You just have to look at both the men's and women's FIFA Pro World 11s. They are packed with players, for instance, playing in England. You got the men's World 11 doesn't feature. I'm just looking now, any player from an Asian league, an African league. In fact, there's no African player at all. Looking at the women's 11 as well, it's absolutely packed with England players. There's not a single player again from Africa, no one from South America, no one from Asia, or indeed Oceania, not forgetting the sixth FIFA Confederation. And, that is not making football global, is it?
No, but it's not. Just to go back to Alex Morgan, isn't she a sort of close personal friend of yours, Rob? I seem to remember you when she was at Tottenham for that short spell, you were sort of interviewing her every week.
There was one interview. I think I did. Yeah, just after she did join. That was a very short stint, wasn't it? It was, I think, due to the issues around COVID era league breaks, and it gave her a period to come to England to play for Tottenham.
Right, there was few American players came there, but just on that, you mentioned there was all those England players in the women's team of the year. There were a couple of Spanish players. Don't forget, Spain won the World Cup, and they won the final. I think they were arguably the dominant team in that against England, and they had fewer players in that team of the year. But again, not to labour it. It's just it's just strange the awards and the speaking of Spain, the manager who led Spain to the World Cup victory, Jorge Vilda, was persona non grata. It seemed not on the short list, kind of a forgotten person. And just remind us why.
Well, of course, he should now be basking in his brand new contract that's been promised by Luis Rubiales just a week or so after the World Cup final, when he stood up at the Congress and vowed to fight on and not to quit. He was going to award a big new contract to Jorge Vilda. The Spain coach had already seen a dozen players refuse to be with him at that World Cup in Australia because of their issues with him and the federation.
Yeah, Vilda was forced out, wasn't he, effectively, for his sort of supporting Rubiales. I think FIFA did the right thing there. You can't possibly have him on the shortlist. It would be far too embarrassing for everyone concerned. Not least Jorge Vilda.
Yeah, think of the awkwardness there. It was almost as awkward as when they announced Lionel Messi in the room. Martyn, we were kind of there. No one knew what to do, did they, when Lionel Messi's name came out as the men's player of the year? Do you want to describe the scene?
Yeah, I mean, I've covered these awards best part of 20 years, and normally when they announce the winner, there's sort of cheers and applause, and usually they put the recipients as there. No, there was almost complete silence. It was really, really strange. Nobody really, there's a bit of a sprinkling of applause, but it was what do we do now? The camera went to panned on Alfie Haaland, Erling Haaland's father, was looking very disgruntled. Then Thierry Henry just said, "Oh well, I'll pick the trophy up then because Lionel Messi's not here." And it was all.
Yeah, and Henry was the host of the show, right?
Yeah. It was all very awkward, and just certainly one of the more weird award ceremonies I've covered.
Nothing at all awkward though about the FIFA Best Women's Award winner, Aitana Bonmati, the Spain World Cup winner, star of that squad, also won the Champions League with Barcelona, the Spanish League as well, and the Super Cup. So a deserved winner for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she was wonderful. Just and if you watch the clips on YouTube, if you haven't watched her play before, there's sparkling talent and much deserved winner in the women's contest.
Women's Coach of the Year, Sarina Wiegman, who finished runner-up with England. And the next day I was with her at Wembley, interviewing her after signing her new England contract until 2027. What's quite interesting, it seems, saying now, no other approaches for her to tempt her away from the England job. And of course, one of the things that comes up inevitably when you're doing one of those interviews and it's about a new contract then is pay. However much, obviously, particularly the women's game, might hope for parity down the line, meaning that conversations, interviews like that aren't dominated by things like how much you paid. Do you have closer to parity with the men's game? But certainly it does seem like she believes that she is valued.
Yeah, I think probably the reason she hasn't had approaches is because she is already was one of the highest paid women's coaches, and the only sort of rival would have been the USA. They've already appointed Emma Hayes. So although it looks like Sarina Wiegman's going to be on about the same sort of money as Emma Hayes, England and the USA are by far the biggest payers. So in a way, she's sort of priced out of the rest of the market.
And also how much coverage Sarina Wiegman's new contract got in England, a sign just a sense of the growth of the women's game. Well, that was the FIFA Awards.
Great.
So Everton, why have they been charged again? So while we're waiting around the FIFA hotel for the awards in the evening, we got news from the Premier League about The latest were after charges over alleged breaches of the profit and sustainability rules. Everton charged again. Nottingham Forest for the first time. This is all about losses exceeding those allowed. So Everton first, there's a lot of anger about why they've been charged again. Some calling it double jeopardy.
Yeah. I don't want to blow my own trumpet too much, but you might remember I did sort of did a story at the start of the month forecasting that this was going to happen. And the reason is fairly straightforward, is it's a rolling 3-year period for Everton. Their financial losses for last season are sort of fairly similar to the season before. So they're in a situation where they're, if you follow the rules every year until you sort yourself out, you can be in a position where you're going to breach the 105 million losses permitted over 3 years and get another charge. I mean, that's just what the rules state. And Nottingham Forest have been spent incredibly heavily in the Championship. They had a wage bill double their revenue. I mean, that's sort of unsustainable. So it's no big surprise for me that they were charged too.
No. So you've articulated that fairly clearly. The rules are there. The 105 million PSR for Everton and all the other Premier League clubs for 3 years. Nottingham Forest 61 million because the first 2 years were the Championship years, and the amount you can overspend by is lower. But everyone knew the rules. Everton knew the rules. Nottingham Forest knew the rules. The other 18 Premier League teams know the rules. They're defined. The other thing is we've talked about this. This is an expedited process again that all the teams knew about. They voted on this new process, so all the cases have to be done within the season. So we should get a result, even the appeal, by May, and the points, if they're deducted, will be taken off this year's tally. So let me ask you, why is there so much anger, and particularly in sections of the media saying this is unfair, what about the fans, all of these things? If it was all so clear, why is there so much kind of hand-wringing from the public in some quarters and from the media in some quarters?
Until this had happened, the fans were protesting against Farhad Moshiri's running of the club, and he was incredibly unpopular. And suddenly now it's sort of turned, the Premier League are the bad guys. So it's very, very convenient for the people who run Everton. Because actually, if you look at their figures, the financial mismanagement has been unbelievable. There's that. It's been fueled by the local politicians. The mayor of Liverpool, Andy Burnham, who's an Evertonian, mayor of Manchester. But I also think there is this thing which we've touched on, and actually which came up when the Richard Masters, the Premier League chief executive, appeared before the Select Committee on Tuesday, and that is the 115 charges against Manchester City.
There is a broader issue of communication around these breaches of financial regulation and the Premier League communication more broadly around punishing clubs. And again, I must say, what happened this week was a mess as well, wasn't it? The clubs, they self-reported, it turns out, so they knew they were going to have this challenge, this case being brought against them. Both Nottingham Forest and Everton like the other teams, they knew their situation. So they were ready with a statement that was produced and sent to the media on an embargoed basis, assuming the Premier League was going to announce the charges at 4 p.m. And they didn't. So what happened?
Yeah, there was that. There was that slight. I think it was 4:10 p.m. It was like these statements were issued, and that you can't use it until 4:10 p.m. And then there was a sort of confusion over the fact, because it hadn't been posted by the Premier League on its website, were the statements still embargoed? I mean, and I think Everton were trying to tell people that they were. Nottingham Forest were saying, no, you can use it. And then so it was all completely confusion and nonsense. I mean, and I think that, there are questions of, quite how long clubs should be, what notice they should be given so that they can get their ducks in a row. Manchester City, I think, when they had their charges announced, it was like within a few minutes of it going live on the Premier League's website. So there's a certain difference there as well.
And then at the Select Committee hearing at Parliament the next day, by coincidence of timing perhaps, Richard Masters, the Premier League chief executive, was speaking, and he was asked about the Manchester City case. And it was there that he revealed and confirmed that there was now a date set for the hearing.
If any club, whether they're the current champions or otherwise, had been found in breach of the spending rules for year 23, they would be in exactly the same position as Everton or Nottingham Forest. But the volume and character of the charges laid before Man City, which I obviously cannot talk about at all, are being heard in a completely different environment. There is a date set for that proceeding. Unfortunately, I can't tell you when that is, but that is progressing.
Can you give us you can't give us the status of the Man City and indeed the Chelsea investigations?
No, I can't give any details on Man City beyond saying that a date has been set. I can't tell you when that date is. On Chelsea, as you know, the new owners of Chelsea came forward with information to the FA, UEFA and the Premier League about previous ownership, and we're still investigating that. And we don't announce the outcome of that until we have completed those investigations.
Of course, we're now a year on since the charges were announced, but he couldn't actually give the date of the hearing. And obviously, a lot of people then asking, perhaps in the media, why did it take until this moment in front of the Select Committee for him to at least even just confirm the existence of a date for the hearing? Now, I do get a sense that throughout this process in particular, they're very wary of any step being put wrong, anything that Manchester City could use as grounds for the Premier League not following their correct procedure. Even things like announcing that there's been a decision on when the hearing would be could potentially be grounds that could scupper the case. So what did we make of what he said in front of the Select Committee, Richard Masters?
Why is the Premier League so terrified of saying, we seem to accept this too easily, that anything set like this it's not a jury trial. This is not. We're not going to the old.
But there's still regulations, aren't there, that will be poured over. Those regulations, of course, ultimately agreed by the 20 clubs.
Yeah, but the idea that you can't say that a date has been set, that level of censorship, given that there is so much public interest and it's important to the public, and people spend I don't know how many millions every year on TV rights and going to football matches to expect the level playing field. They want to know what's happening with this thing. You don't need the ins and outs. Why couldn't they have said the date, Martyn? You follow this really closely, without going in front of a parliamentary committee.
Yeah. Well, the Premier League say that they're not allowed to reveal the date or location of a hearing. I mean, I haven't poured through the Premier League handbook to see if that's the case, but that is what they say.
Wow.
But so I agree. I agree. Rules is rules, but not all rules are particularly good.
Yeah, maybe this should be changed. But obviously a lot of focus on why the City case is taking so long, and now the Everton and Nottingham Forest ones are due to be completed at least by the end of May. Of course, that does still lead this to the situation where the season could end and appeals are still being resolved after what we think is the final league standings are completed. But this is part of a new fast-track process, isn't it?
The rules state that the disciplinary hearings for breaching of the profit and sustainability rules will have to be heard by April the 8th, and appeals done with by the end of May, the end of the season. I think that's what they say, so I can't see any particular reason why that should extend. I mean, I think what we'll find out, Everton will find out the result of their appeal against the initial 10 points deduction. Should that be overturned, which I think is unlikely, I think it's more like because they've already admitted a sort of smaller breach, and I think it's more likely there'll be a sort of reduction in the 10-point sanction rather than anything else. But should it be overturned completely, then obviously that would have implications for the second charge.
Because the calculations will have to be altered, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
Did anything else come out of that select committee, there was Rick Parry there from the EFL and Richard Masters. And, one of the issues, Martyn and Rob, there was this delay in getting a settlement for the amount of money the Premier League sends down to the 3 leagues, English leagues below it. That seems to be stuck. And this issue of parachute payments are the amounts that relegated clubs get from the Premier League for the first, 3 years after relegation, in order to sort of not fall off a cliff with their balance sheet.
And one of the things Rick Parry, the EFL chair, talked about was fixture congestion, and he said they wanted the Premier League to drop to 18 teams. That's been something the FA had been interested in for some time, but Rick Parry saying that didn't seem to go down very well at the Premier League. He said they'd also be prepared for things like FA Cup replays to go and not having 2-legged League Cup semi-finals, just single legs. But as he said we would like some money.
Yeah. I mean, I think Richard Masters confirmed what the delay has been. Effectively, the Premier League clubs, firstly, they can't come to an agreement on how to pay for this extra 125 million a year. Should it be the clubs in Europe paying more? Should it be a sort of reflecting what they get from their TV money? Should the top club, from their TV, their Premier League TV money, should that reflect how much they pay back to the EFL? And the other thing is that they want to know what the sort of future financial regulation is going to be. So he did say that the current profit sustainability rules are going to change. They're going to have a sort of UEFA style squad cost control. You can only spend a percentage of your salary on wages and transfers, but the PSR rules may continue alongside that. So I think he said the clubs want to know that first.
You know what I found really interesting in that new settlement, if it is the UEFA 70% of revenues can be spent on transfer and wages, was how the Premier League, teams that are in the Champions League or in Europe, they're capped at 70%, but teams outside of that, so outside of the top 6, say, they could spend up to 85%. So the team's trying to catch up with the top teams. However, in the Championship, they've said teams relegated from the Premier League could spend 85%, and the rest of the league could spend 70%. It's kind of a perverse difference, i.e. the ones in the lower half of the Premier League can spend more to catch up, but the teams in the Championship are at a disadvantage to the teams that are relegated from the Premier League. It seems a cake and eat it approach if you talk to the EFL from the Premier League. But very interesting. It's very hard to see how this settles, to be honest.
Well, that's what the regulator could be tasked with doing if and when the regulator is introduced by legislation into English football.
Slightly cynical about exactly what the powers a regulator would have. I still think it's not going to be as strong as some people think it will be.
Of course, many hoping the regulator would have a strong involvement in takeovers, but maybe not as desired. This week, we've had some more details on one of the investments of the last year, the most protracted one, Manchester United, with Sir Jim Ratcliffe agreeing his deal for just over 25% of the club. And this week, we got the documentation via the US Securities and Exchange Commission that gives all the details behind how this share offering eventually reached a deal. And within it, we get to learn a lot more about the other known major bidder, Sheikh Jassim, the Qatari banker, who I think we only ever saw one picture of maybe, and we certainly never heard from him during this process. A lot was through various anonymous briefings. Now perhaps some of that detail being questioned, because all this detail raised into doubt, did he ever have the money? Did he ever prove he could fund this 100% takeover of Manchester United?
Well, if you look at the statement released to the SEC, the answer to that is proof of funds were never presented, but multiple bids were made and they were entertained. So it's interesting. For me, the takeaway here is it seemed there were only two bidders for this great club, Manchester United, throughout this. Imagine if there was just one bidder, which might explain why Rain, the merchant bank, kept this other bid, this Sheikh Jassim Qatar bid, alive for so long without them ever, meeting this request to approve funds. Because, if you only have one bidder, it's hard to bid the price up. And the thing that these documents have shown is the evolution of the bids and how the price kept going up. So, Rain did a great job for the Glazers. They got a lot more than Jim Ratcliffe was willing to pay for them, and a great deal for the Glazers. And in many ways, it's thanks to the stalking horse, if you want, of Sheikh Jassim kind of riding along without ever showing proof of funds.
Yeah, I mean, you imagine if Jim Ratcliffe was reading that, he might be a bit annoyed. He said, "Hang on a minute, I was like bidding against somebody who the bank weren't comfortable with their level of financial commitments. Why, surely I should have been told that at the time, but you can see why perhaps he wasn't. But I think if I was him, I'd be a bit, I'm not sure about that.
Bidding against yourself. And Rain, the details show, earned, I think, more than $30 million from that process. Rain, of course, earned similar, if not more, from the sale of Chelsea a year earlier. And that's the banker in New York, Joe Ravitch, and his deputy, Colin Neville and co. So, a good couple of years for them from these two deals.
Good for Qatar too. I saw one post on X by Cy Lloyd, a journalist and author, Manchester United fan, who tweeted, "Qatar flag emojis in your Twitter names for absolutely nothing." It's referring to all those United fans who were actively demanding full sale now, were talking up Qatar, and indeed some sort of quite a lot of influencers perhaps as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That just shows you the kind of world we live in, where artifice, if you want, is as powerful as anything else in terms of getting engagement. And we've talked about it before. Rio Ferdinand, the former Manchester United captain and central defender, over the summer made a sort of a selfie video at a train station, it seemed like, saying that the sale to Jassim was imminent. That moved share prices and got a lot of people excited, and that didn't turn out to be the case. But the other thing in this, and it's been reported, but it's a bit clearer, Martyn, Rob, that the Glazers could sell the team within 18 months, and Jim Ratcliffe would have to sell if he can't match the offer, right, of any new buyer.
Yeah, it's called a drag-along right. So they can't approach anybody for 12 months, the Glazers. But after that, if they want to seek out, go back to Sheikh Jassim or somebody else, they can go back and say, look, we want to sell out the whole club. What they have to do is go to Jim Ratcliffe and say, look, we've had an offer. You have the right to make the first offer. But if it's not as high as the other one, then we not only can we go back to them, but you have to sell all your shares as well to the highest, to this new person. So it's in some ways there is some protection for Jim Ratcliffe because he does this right of the first offer, but it absolutely maintains the Glazers' hold over the club in the long term.
Yeah, and what a deal for some of them in terms of how much they've made from it. Also, some of those within the Manchester United administration too.
Yeah, Patrick Stewart, the interim chief executive, and Cliff Beattie, the chief financial officer, they get a completion bonus, and each completion bonus is equal to 2 times their annual salary at the date of closing. So, that's basically 7-figure sums. Not bad.
Not bad at all, but perhaps not as much as Bruce Buck and Marina Granovskaya got famously from the Chelsea sale. And the other big winners here in terms of, I guess now current former employees, Ed Woodward former chief executive of United, walks away with a few million. Richard Arnold, his replacement outgoing, will get a hefty sum too. So people who might be leaving or have left will be leaving with fatter bank balances as a result of this.
And so much comes back to that Sheikh Jassim bid, the reality, what was being said. We didn't speak to him directly, however much we were wanting to. So a lot is coming through those associated with him, whether it's those communicating and briefing on his behalf. Obviously, we're all keen to know information. A lot can't be on the record very often.
One thing about at least the way the takeovers are done in the USA for these publicly listed companies, you do get a huge amount of information which you wouldn't get elsewhere. For example, with the Chelsea takeover, there's nothing like that sort of level of information. So I think that sort of transparency is really helpful.
Yeah, just on the process, as a media question as well. Look, Manchester United equals engagement. Glazers equal engagement. Manchester United plus possible Glazers sale equals super engagement. So it's clearly what we saw. And the question is, some of the nonsense that kind of fills the air here for so long is part of the world we live in now, isn't it? I mean, whether it's that sale. Think about football transfers, the amount of noise around those that now has kind of morphed into club sale talks as well. It's the same sort of conversation, the same sort of engagement, isn't it?
And it's why, particularly those comms people perhaps listening, we might question some of the stuff they're trying to tell us at times. I had it during this process, even when we would get told something was a final bid, and I might sort of say, well, weren't we told that a few weeks ago?
Yeah, well, actually, if you look at the SEC document, and there's a few of them, and I'd encourage people to read it, but you need a big cup of coffee. There's many pages there. The thing about those final bids was it seemed like Rain's process, they kept asking for final bids as well that weren't final bids, and that kind of I guess led to the reporting that way. It's the way the sale was handled that way. And again, Rain managed to get a big fat ticket price for the Glazers as a result of this, got themselves a load of money. And, media, in a way, unknowingly played a blinder for them as well, and keeping this going, the 2-horse race, probably getting Jim Ratcliffe and Co twitchy and increasing their bids. This was a great kind of, looking back, and it will be a great exercise in seeing how these kind of very public takeovers work and the roles of various actors, including us in the media.
I imagine if Manchester United was one of those clubs as we get on the continent where you have elected presidents, because that's the situation at Porto. And here's a name that's running as a candidate for presidency: Andre Villas-Boas, former Chelsea, former Tottenham manager.
Wow,
maybe Bobby Robson's neighbour in the old days. I think that's where he got his start. Bobby Robson, former England manager, Newcastle manager, and Porto manager back in the day. So yeah, that's he's always been quick, hasn't he, in terms of career development? Very young manager, and now potentially a very young football club president.
Well, given Jose Mourinho has just been sacked by Roma, former Porto manager, perhaps he could put in a late charge to challenge Villas-Boas for the presidency.
Just wait till an aggregator account picks up your comment on here. That will feed some interactions.
Yeah.
Now, I think something which might actually take our interactions into the stratosphere is mentioning Taylor Swift, because Taylor Swift's boyfriend, Travis Kelce, NFL player, he is on his rival podcast, The Sport Unlocked. He's been talking about potential for a Welsh rugby union player, Lewis Rees-Zammit, to go to the NFL. this is a story that piqued your interest, guys?
It did.
Yeah.
I called you because you're my rugby expert, Martyn. So I saw that, and I thought that's is it as interesting as I think it is. This 22-year-old Wales star, 5 tries at the World Cup. God, it seems like right at the kind of start of his career and moving to America and trying another sport. I called you and I said, Martyn, this sounds like a really big deal, is it? And I think you filled me in.
Yeah, I think. It's very, very, very difficult for these sort of crossovers to NFL because it is such a sort of highly specialized sport, and you have the competition is just incredible. But it could happen. I think there's one Australian rugby league player who's made it, played in the Super Bowl. But I think it's a tough ask. Christian Wade went and tried his luck. He's a very, very fast player. He never got to make a performance in the NFL. But Reece Zammit, he's 22. He's one of the best rugby union players in the world. I think he's incredibly fast, 10.5 seconds, 100 meters. So that's the sort of extreme athleticism you need to make it in the NFL. So it'll be fascinating.
Yeah, and he's joined the international player pathway, so there's no guarantee he's actually going to be joining a team. It's not like he's signed for an NFL franchise, so it's just the hope of doing so. But you think he does have the potential, obviously, to return to rugby union if it doesn't work out there, certainly at the right age. Another rugby union player who's made the switch, a former England player, Harry Mallender, he's in his late 20s, so perhaps this is a chance for him for another sort of route in sport to perhaps earn some cash, because I did see that the minimum salary on an NFL franchise can be $750,000. That's considerably more than rugby union salaries for most players.
Yeah, I think Reece Zammit would probably be on not far short of that in terms of, because he plays the British Lions as well. Mallender is an interesting one. So he's trying to get in as a kicker. So you have specialist punters and kickers in the NFL. It's not like in rugby union where you do everything. I think that's another sort of way in. But you're right. Generally, the financial rewards are absolutely much, much, much higher than in rugby union, and especially we're seeing in British rugby union, because what this has done has flagged up the fact that other countries are offering more. So you've got a lot of England players heading to France because the contracts there are so much more lucrative.
And it's the skill set these guys possess. And I remember being in Australia for the Women's World Cup, and while they're seeing how big the Australian Football League is there's the AFL, very different sport, very much within Australia. And there was a player who I think was playing for Collingwood, one of the big teams in that league, and was an American guy. And I was curious as to how this guy got recruited. And it was almost like the opposite of what the NFL is doing, with the AFL going to American colleges, finding people with the right physique and potential to join their league, and they found this giant American guy who seems to be having a career there. So it's interesting, this kind of global talent search, which isn't sport specific in a sense, in terms of where the players' roots are.
Yeah, not just the players as well. Even just this week, seeing some of the NFL reporters apparently on deals worth tens of millions of dollars.
Do you think we could break into the NFL if it tens of millions of dollars? If that's the sort of pay that we could expect, can we get in there?
Well, the money's about reporting trades and the like. It's not about, I don't think, it's analysing the game as much. So who knows? NFL transfer insider.
Yeah, that's where the big bucks are, guys.
Absolutely. Been a really great discussion, guys. Enjoyed that a lot.
Good to speak, and thanks to those at the FIFA hotel for being so welcome to us as well. And also, quite a few people there discovering us who hadn't heard us for the first time. Some catching up on past episodes, which anyone, of course, can do. They go back all the way to 2021 inside the world of sport. And as ever, you can hit subscribe so we land in your feeds automatically. But for now, thank you for listening. Goodbye.